All right, we are live. What is up, swimmers and swammers? Welcome back to the SwimSwam Breakdown. As always, I am your host, Coleman Hodges, coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, joined by my fellow New Yorker, Sophie Kaufman, SwimSwam writer, as well as the swim scribe himself, David Clossy from St. Cloud, Minnesota. What's up, everyone? Thank you for being here. Right off the top on this swimming-centric podcast, thoughts on the Super Bowl last night. David, I'm going to throw this one to you first. What'd you think?
Well, I really enjoyed the fact that, based on the performance of, it was like the Vikings were there because that's how the Chiefs' offensive line looked, was just like our offensive line against the Rams, where it was, okay, I was worried that I was maybe, not seeing colors right. I'm like, I swear those are red jerseys, but they look exactly like, oh, hey, they're folding immediately back to the quarterback and he's getting sacked all over and over again. It's nice to see that it happens to other teams too.
I'm so sorry for your Vikings, but yeah, also, it's not just their issue. It's also, yeah, my Kansas City Chiefs could not handle that either. Sophie, I know you're an insanely big football fanatic. Thoughts on last night's
Exactly.
game?
I could not have put it better myself. If I had to pick one sentence to describe me, that it would be insanely big football fan. No, I tuned in for Kendrick. Kendrick was great. I had a great time.
That's honestly, especially speaking as a fair weather Chiefs fan, that's all you needed is the halftime show. It was a great performance. I enjoyed seeing Kendrick, SZA, and the rest as well at the halftime performance. Most of all, I enjoyed SwimSwam's Instagram memes immediately. I think we got them in the third quarter, memes from the halftime show. So if you haven't seen those yet, go check out SwimSwam's Instagram. They're top drawer. I'd say they're great football, great swimming memes, great anything memes. But that's about as far as we're gonna go on this podcast on the Super Bowl because
But that's what all my notes were about, Coleman. That's what all my prep time went into Super Bowl analysis. And it's not good.
It's not good. We could turn this podcast into a 1-hour talk show analyzing the Super Bowl from a swimmer's perspective.
I gotta go.
But we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl to come, which is for swimmers, the aquatic Super Bowl, the NCAA championships. We're going to talk about the end of the dual meet season. We're going to talk about a pretty revelatory swim we got to see this past weekend at the Cavalier Invite, where both Walsh sisters threw down 56.8s in the 100-yard breaststroke. Sophie, I'm going to throw this one to you first. Just your immediate reaction of how versatile Gretchen Walsh is, and also that Alex can still get a leg up on her, even if it's by 0.01.
Yeah, as an older sister myself, it meant a lot to see Alex pull that victory out for the older siblings in the crowd. No, it was really special to see them both put in swims like that. And then as far as Gretchen's versatility goes, we've been on here talking about how she's putting in these like historic relay splits and it's making no noise. And the question was, well, can she do anything that's going to get everybody's attention again in January? And, it's early February, but yes, it turns out she just needs to swim 100 breaststroke. It's insanely fast. Yeah, it was incredible to see, her prelim swim. I think she was 57.3, and that was jaw-dropping. And then I didn't expect her to go again in finals, but to see her, just how much she improved from prelims to finals, and had such a great race with Alex, who, win a lifetime best as well. And I think now they're 8 and 9 all time. And Virginia has 4 100 breaststrokers in history who have gone 56. It's ridiculous.
Dang, that is ridiculous. I hadn't even considered that, and all in the last 3 years, 4 years.
I don't remember when Alexis Wenger went her time exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, It's
recently.
either 22 or 23. Sheesh. David, throwing the ball to you. Thoughts on just the utter dominance in yards that the Walsh sisters have, as well as this versatility of like, what can't they do?
Yeah, I mean it's crazy, and it's nice that for obviously Gretchen is the one that's getting most of the headlines because it's a lot more unexpected for that. But this continues a good trend we're seeing out of Alex, right? It's the fact that she just went that personal best at the Eddie Reese showdown, and then she's brought it just a little bit lower at this meet, and it's showing some really real good signs in that 100 breaststroke, and just being able to keep improving on that, getting faster. And, it's what a way to follow up your first time under 57 seconds by doing it again and going even faster. And then for Gretchen, obviously versatility is the word that everyone's throwing around with that. And I think that the cool thing in particular about this being a breaststroke swim is that the first thing that everyone says whenever a swimmer is really versatile in short course in general, but in specifically short course yards, because of how dominant underwaters are, is like, oh, well, they're only good at underwater kicking. They're, because that skill transfers so well. It is, when Gretchen is kicking to 15 off of every wall in 100 freestyle and 100 back and 100 fly. Some people detract by it by going, well, it's just there's barely anything changing in between when you surface and when you turn. That's not the case in breaststroke because she's not going to 15 meters off of each pullout. It's probably the most over the top of the water swimming that we see out of Gretchen because she's so good at hitting that 15-meter mark on every wall in her events. And so I think it's cool that it's versatility in addition to being, her worst stroke.
Mm-hmm.
She's got records in the other three. So even if she's in the top 10 all time, it's still her worst stroke. And, so in addition to just being different like that, the fact that it's taking away her biggest tool in short course swimming shows that there really is more to her skill set than just the underwater kicking of it. So I think it's a real good counterpoint to anyone whose immediate reaction to her being so fast in so many different events in short course is, well, that's because the underwater kicking. Not exclusively.
Yeah, and I think what you just said and just this event as a whole, the fact that Gretchen Walsh swam 100 breast and went historically fast in it highlights so many things that UVA has done well or had success doing. One of which is being 100 IMs in practice. Like Todd DeSorbo loves them. He's like, I don't know if the athletes actually like them that much, but we do them quite often. They race the 100 IM quite often at multiple home meets. And I think we now see the value in that is that it makes your athletes more versatile and it teaches them how to be fast in all four strokes, not just versatile, but speed as well. If you train it and if you race it, those skills are going to grow and grow. Number two thing that UVA does a lot is it puts their athletes in off events. Especially at the Cavalier Invite, which is for some members of their team serves as kind of like a last meet of the season. For some members of the team, it's kind of just a tune-up in between this season, the Eddie Reese showdown and the ACC championships. But it's an opportunity to race, and we've seen multiple of their top athletes swim off events at this meet. We've seen, I think a 200 back from someone, or a 200 fly, or a 200 breast, or a 200 free, but we've seen off events at this meet before. And this year we get to see Gretchen Walsh do something that she'll probably never swim seriously, but because she's Gretchen Walsh, she goes fast anytime she falls into a pool. And this time we got to see really what that looked like, especially I'm sure the pressure was on racing her older sister, who could be the NCAA champion in this event in a month. And it's I think we're seeing why UVA is as dominant and as good as they are, is because they're doing these things to create a fun racing environment for a lot of their athletes, and an environment that is going to get them a lot of speed work as well. So Yeah, that was pretty sweet. I wouldn't have predicted Gretchen going a 56.8. That's pretty ridiculous, but to also see the strides that Alex is making is really exciting. We're going to circle back to this topic in sink or swim a little bit later, but I really did enjoy the fiery arguments we had in the comment section of this article about if Gretchen or Caleb Dressel was the best of the best yard swimmer, or Leon, which I think at this point you can make a really good argument for all three, which makes it pretty fun. But we're going to get to that in sink or swim. So the other half of this podcast is just kind of looking back on the dual meet season now that it is officially over. We're not going to preview conferences in this podcast. We'll save that for next week or later in this week. But the last few meets of the season, we didn't get to talk right after the Eddie Reese showdown, but since then we've had like a Cal Stanford dual meet that was exceedingly quick. We had the Cavalier Invite. We had numerous other rivalry dual meets, but are there specific things that you saw from the last couple weeks of regular season competition that really stood out to you guys? David, I'm going to throw this one to you first.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really exciting results in a lot of different meets. Like you mentioned, the Eddie Reese Showdown was one that got the most fanfare because in addition to being exciting swimming, there is also just that extra element on the showmanship of the meet as a whole. Obviously, we had Luke Orlando getting that NCAA record in the 200 fly because we haven't been able to talk about that one yet. That was incredibly shocking, which is how he likes to do his NCAA records as well, because I was caught equally as off guard when he got that 100 back record in 2022.
I think
which
so.
is that's cool to see him get that. It was already cool enough to see him make that Olympic team, but just with the journey he's gone on with kind of injuries and stuff like that. So seeing him get it done in the big pool over the summer and then now in that intense NCAA environment, that was really cool. A big one, which I know has been talked about quite a bit. I think it even got its own article like right after the Eddie Reese Showdown of SwimSwam, but it was Texas freshman Kyle Peck was one that really is interesting in terms of like looking ahead towards the end of the year championships, because he made some big drops at the Eddie Reese Showdown. I think he improved in like 2 out of his 3 primary events at midseason and then dropped all those times and his personal best from high school at that showdown. And they were big drops in kind of that key position because he was kind of like on the outskirts of, I don't know if outskirts of qualifying, but even like probably 8 to 10 spots out of scoring range in the current standings from his like mid-season times to he's like 7th to 9th in all 3 of his events. So you've gone from, maybe if he has a really good swim in NCAAs to he could like maybe score a couple points to, he's a solid A finalist potential in multiple events. He'll need a fight for it in prelims, which is what makes NCAA so exciting. But he's now already kind of shown that he's capable of what he needs to do to get in that spot because he's already ranking within the top 8 in those events. And the reason why I find that so particular and that's such a key spot to jump to is the fact that when you're a team like Texas who's hunting for that team title, it's guys like that that mostly make that difference, is those people who can surprise grab an A final spot in prelims who weren't seeded in that position. This is kind of like a little bit earlier of where you normally see that jump because it feels like every year there's someone who's like, he was seeded like 20th coming in and now he's 5th after the prelims. How do you make that in? And that is such a key, is though that kind of scoring depth is the real difference maker for teams like that.
I think we've seen a couple cases like that at Texas where people have made big jumps. I spoke with Nate German-Prey, who I think he's the top 100 breaststroker in the country this year, or number 2. Number 2, 50.3. But, he's like, last year I was focusing on the 200 freestyle on my day 3 event. And now, switched to breaststroke and like, seems to be going pretty well for him. So it seems like there have been a few cases like that where people have reacted quite well to Bob Bowman and his staff coming in and the transition from Eddie Reese to the Bowman era at Texas. But like you said, it's like, will that be enough? Will they have enough of those flips or enough of those diamonds in the rough coming out at the right time at NCAAs, which is kind of the question. But yeah, I think that was a great takeaway from the Eddie Reese showdown. I really liked seeing who showed up. I feel like that meet, to me, on the men's side, the biggest surprise was the ASU men looking so dominant, especially in the relays. It's like,
Oh yeah,
because we haven't really talked about them as title contenders all year, which I think is fair. But like speaking with Ilya Karun after the meet, he still had the mentality. He seemed to still have the mentality of like, we're trying to win. And he's like, I know that we might not, but like, we want to be top 5. Like, we want to be the very best that we can be. But it's like, but they still have the mentality of like, we're champions and we're trying to defend that position. And they're swimming like it, right? I mean, like, every time they jump in the water, they're going lights out. Their relays, I think, are top of the country, if not first or second. But it's like, I think they have a legitimate shot at winning 2 or 3 relays at NCAAs, which, again, after all the departures they had, is really impressive to me that they're still in several events, one of, if not the favorites. Sophie, thoughts on the end of the season or takeaways from Eddie Reese or from any other meet that you thought was interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what's already been said. I think with Kyle Peck, I think he was shaved and at least a little bit tapered, but it's not just him that Texas has, that it's kind of like bordering on making that jump. Camden Taylor and Garrett Gould have looked really strong all season too and made similarly big drops. And it'll be interesting to see what they can bring, at SECs now and heading into NCAAs, if they can kind of take it to the next level too, because that having more than one guy who can possibly make that jump is going to be really important for Texas, and also for ASU, as they're trying to stay in the top 5. Like, if they want to, like, their relays are going to be how they're going to do it. And their relays have looked strong all season. It's clear that this has been a really big focus for them, coming into, okay, we've got Texas, Indiana, Cal are all coming at them, as they try and defend this title. And those are 3 powerhouse programs, right? Like, what is going to help them kind of stay afloat in that fight? And it's going to be their relays, and Cal is trying to respond to that too. We saw Lucas Henvo at Cal Stanford just continue to throw down really impressive swims. He's now top in the country in the mile, in top 5 in the 500 free. And that addition is a really interesting one for Cal, because it's kind of, when you think about who you need, the kind of swimmer you need to win at NCAAs, it's sprinters, right? But distance has been kind of a weak spot for Cal the last couple of years. And by bringing Henvo back, that's suddenly not an issue. And, their sprint program is doing fine. But this might be the missing piece for them. Yeah, they're fine.
And especially if they're thinking ahead to that battle with Texas as one of the big major contenders in that, is that in that 500 they're looking really good in that 500. So being able to sneak someone into that a final to battle them, and they've also got right now 2 in the top 8 in the mile as well. And so to have one of your swimmers as the top in the country right now, that's another thing where it's even if, like, yeah, mathematically it doesn't necessarily matter which events you have, so overall points totally doesn't matter as much as of like bumping people out of finals or out of scoring in general, if you can do that. But I feel like a huge thing is momentum at NCAA, especially because it's a meet. I feel like momentum can be massive in a single day meet, let alone a multi-day meet, because you can carry that, energy from a electric final session into a really good prelim session, or really good prelims into that night's finals to try and move up or maintain seed depending on where you land from the prelims. And I think that having someone who is a threat, who can battle, who can have a lights out performance in as many events as possible can help either build that momentum early in a session. Because if if your best swim is like the second to last event, you're not able to capitalize on that as much. Because like, oh man, we finally, and time to get back on the bus and go back to the hotel. So if you're able to go early, or if you have people who can you have like an electric swim that gets the whole team fired up in the beginning of the session, and then you have more people kind of also keeping that ball rolling until your next like major point generating event. I think just having as many swimmers as possible, even if it doesn't necessarily in as many events as possible, even if it doesn't make that much of a difference mathematically outside of being able to make those kind of very key like breakpoint areas where you bump someone in, bump another team out of a final. I think it can have a big psychological effect that can go and snowball into something pretty sustainable.
I feel like we've seen that in several cases at NCAAs, both men and women. But that brings up a curious point, which is how Cal will use Gabe Jett at NCAAs, because he essentially has two completely different event lineups that he could pursue at a an A final in all 6 events. Essentially, it's like he's gone the 5 free, 2 free, 2 fly route the last few years. This at midseason, he swam 2 IM, 1 back, 2 back, and went, I think, top 5 times in all of them. He was 141, 2 IM, 138, 2 back, 44 in the 100 back, I think. Like,
sounds right.
Yeah, I mean, like,
those are big drops for him too.
Big drops. So when I spoke to him on the podcast after that meet, he said, I basically just told Dave, look, it's my last year. I will do whatever you want. I will train however you want. I will compete in whatever event you want me to. He said he's been training in the distance lane. My guess is that Cal will put him in his more traditional lineup of 5 free, 2 free, 2 fly, because that's where I think they would need him more. Like 5, but how huge would it be if hypothetically Cal gets 2 up in the 5 free, on day 1 in like one of Texas's strongest events, right? It's like, even if Texas were to outscore Cal in that event, like, that seems so huge for Cal, given that they get better and better each day. And I think they have a lot more events, maybe even later that day in the 50 free, that they will certainly outscore Texas in. I mean, I think that would be, as you were alluding to, David, that would be a huge momentum moment for the Bears. And even if they get 1 in the A final with Lucas Henvo, I think that's still going to be, as Sophie said, a huge piece for the Cal men. And I do feel like the addition of, once again, putting Lucas Henvo back on the team, especially seeing that he is vastly improved, I think, as a swimmer in the last 2 years since he was on the team, he's going to be big for them. But I'm curious, do you guys think one way or the other for Gabe Jett in terms of event lineup is the better option for Cal at NCAAs?
I agree with what you said. I think that seems like the kind of most straightforward and probably likely lineup. And then that I feel like unless someone has some kind of ridiculous breakout at not Pac-12s, wherever they're swimming, ACCs, that was not in my quick access memory there. But unless someone has like a crazy breakout in like some event that would kind of like, oh wow, so and so they're good in the 200. Hey, Gabe, get in this event. Unless something like that happens, which is nice that you have that versatility. That's like one of the nice things with super flexible swimmers like that, is that they can go, if you don't want to necessarily give up entries in those events to maintain the momentum, you go, oh, well, this person qualified. We didn't think they were going to make it, and they're like in scoring range. Yeah, you fill this hole here. So outside of that, I think they're probably going to go just traditional. You've done it before. It's a taxing enough meet. You don't necessarily want to add in unless there's a big benefit to it at like extra variables of okay, now figure out how you're going to manage, because that's the benefit of experience, right? Is that by the time you're at your senior year NCAAs, you got to figure it out what you need to do between sessions, how much time you're going to have between your events, how you're going to manage that flow and that schedule.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of felt like maybe they were choosing to play with his lineup at midseason and see what that could look like for him, especially if they didn't sort out Mew and Tomac's eligibility. But they sorted that out, so they don't now need, they have Destin Lasco and Mew and Tomac to take care of the backstroke events, right? Like they don't necessarily need to put Gabe Jett in there unless, they want to, or he really wants to be there instead of, the 2 fly on the last day. But now, because they've got that piece settled, like he can go back. This is again what David was saying, like the benefit of having a hyper versatile swimmer like that. It's like, oh well, then just go back to the 2 fly where you were top 5 in the NCAA last year. And like that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of hyper versatile athletes, another interesting thing that just came to mind because of we're talking about backstrokes. Hubie Koch has been swimming the 1 fly all year. It seems like he might do that at championship meets instead of the 100 back. Would you say that's the right call for him and for Texas as a team? I don't feel like it's a huge difference to me, but it is odd to me that he could certainly win an NCAA title in the 100 back, seemingly. I mean, he's been in that final. He's been top ranked in the country or close to it in the 100 back. Maybe he doesn't quite have that speed, but I think the 100 back is typically so wide open, especially at the NCAA final, right? Like no one thought Brendan Burns was going to win it once, however many times he won it. I mean, no one thought Coleman Stewart was going to win it when he did. I feel like it's just since Ryan Murphy, that event has been pretty wide open every single year. So it feels odd for him to not swim it, but I guess from a points perspective, like they have Will Modglin, who is right now gonna make the A final, right, on paper. And it's like, do we want 2 in that event, or do we want Hubie trying to make the A final in 100 fly and maybe getting those points in that event where I'm not sure if they have anyone else who would be a surefire A finalist in that event, especially because he's been swimming the butterfly leg on their relays this year as well. So I guess it makes sense. It's just odd to me that he's not going to win an NCAA title in the 100 fly, right? I mean, I feel like I can say that confidently. But he could A final and score some big points there. But it's odd to leave him out of the 100 back, which he could win an NCAA title in.
Yeah. I mean,
I honestly wonder if a big reason for the focus is for the relays, like you mentioned, like, if you're going to want to be competitive in that, especially that 400 medley relay, you're like, okay, we got Will Modglin on that. You get as many race reps as possible in on that 100 fly, and then maybe if that's kind of the angle they're going for, if it's maybe more of a focus on relay. Otherwise, I guess it comes down to basically, like you said very well, is that if you want to go for an event where you can, maybe it's not optimal for your overall team score, but you have a shot at a title, or maybe something is more optimal for your team score, but you're going to be like 4th or 5th.
Yeah. I also think this is like really getting in the weeds with the hypotheticals, but with the 100 fly, you also have the question of like what Jordan Crooks is going to do, right? He's sitting top in the NCAA in the 100 fly and the 200 free this season. So he's got a choice to make there. He could decide to lead off the 800 free relay, and that's his 2 free, and he stays in the 100 fly. But there's a whole lot of these hypotheticals with these like super fast, versatile athletes that depending on the decisions they make, the field could look stronger or a little bit weaker and leave an opportunity for, Hubie Coach to maybe score higher in the 100 fly than he would otherwise if, Crooks was in the field, or to get somebody like Kyle Peck into that A final if the field looks different. And then suddenly that's two people in the A final of the 100 fly for Texas, and they look like geniuses.
Certainly that would be the optimal scenario, hypothetical for Texas. Man, just think of the potential 100 fly A final we could have. Ramadan, Minikov, Crooks, Lindo, Orlando. Man, that if everyone decides to swim it, everyone gets in the A final, that would be an electric race for sure, because you're talking about like the last 3 or 4 NCAA champions and plus like 5 of the top 8 of all time, I think. I mean, it's just that's a lot going on in one heat. But
we have 3 swimmers that have been 43 seconds this year. We have Orlando's been 43.6, Crooks 43.7, Ilya's been 43.
Oh, I forgot about Ilya.
Coach, who were like, he might be like in the middle of the pack. He just went a 44.0.
Man, that event has gotten fast. I feel like we're. Go ahead.
And that's just like this season rankings, and of course you have you mentioned NCAA champions Leando and Ramadan in there too. It's like, oh my god, that's insane. That's gonna be such a deep event. Yeah, Minikov.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be exciting. That's why. So I don't usually go to conference meets. I'm going to ACCs this year, and man, what a meet I feel like the addition of Cal and Stanford, women's and men's side, is going to add so much depth to that meet. I'm never been to an ACC meet before. I'm very excited from a just results standpoint to see what that is like, and then also the environment to see how maybe that changes things, even though I have no point of reference of what the ACC championships was like before. But I mean, I think that might put that conference meet over the top for me versus SECs, even with the addition of Texas, because in terms of just the depth of a conference and of a championships, which I'm sure we'll get to both of these at some point later in a later podcast. But I'm excited to see how the ripple effects and what those championships will look like. That was just kind of a minor sideways rant about nothing, but there you go. Any final thoughts on the dual meet season? Here's my final thought on the dual meet season. Fastest season in history, top to bottom. We've never seen times like this in a regular season, and just thank goodness is my takeaway and my message. Because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the NCAA season was boring. People were swimming in practice suits. They were not, I don't know how seriously they were taking in-season racing. They certainly weren't utilizing it as a rehearsal for the end of the season or for championship season or for championship racing. They were just getting through it. And that wasn't the athlete's fault. Yeah. And I think that was kind of by design, right? We had this system where coaches would beat their athletes into the ground and then slowly bring them back to life in time for the championship season. And now we have this, instead of this gaping hole of a season, we have this like beautiful linear progression that starts way up here, that starts very fast and just keeps getting faster. I think ASU is kind of the best example of this in my mind, where men and women this year, the men's and women's team, you have numerous athletes going best times every time they swim in their primary events, and I think we're seeing that just across the board from a lot of teams where you don't have athletes in this huge hole, and athletes are still training hard and getting better, but people are figuring out, maybe it is better to wear racing suits all the time because we can actually practice going fast. And then we get to the big meet and athletes know how to go fast instead of being like, wait, what is this? How do I react to this? This racing suit feels foreign to me. My hips are in a completely different position, So
I float
exactly. So it's great to see. I love where college swimming is at in those terms, because I think it makes it much more exciting. We're filling up dual meets. We're breaking attendance records. I think this is the most successful season of college swimming in history. I just want to take a minute to address that and appreciate that. And I feel like we are in a good place as a sport from that standpoint. Any takeaways, any final thoughts for this college dual meet season for you guys?
I think that, like you said, from a results perspective, that's been, like we kind of seeing this, we've seen this trend kind of starting maybe last season before, especially like you mentioned with ASU. This really feels like where a lot of programs all over the place, probably especially also with Bowman departing to Texas, then it kind of starts that same philosophy over there. Now you have multiple teams are doing it, and other teams have already been kind of figuring that out. UVA women have always been great at going fast all the time, wearing suits a lot more often. I've always advocated for wearing suits and dual meets for the exact reasons you laid out of, it's not like shaving early where you actually potentially lose the benefit of doing it. Like just use an old suit. I mean, I've got like 3 old suits laying back there that, and I haven't swam in any of them in a very long time compared to swimmers who had a suit from last year, right? So, when people ask like, how would you get the suits? Swimmers have them. They have old suits that they can use for a dual meet. And so I think, and especially I love seeing the increased focus on the production side of dual meets in terms of, it's small things they can do. Like having, this is something that I thought was fantastic about the Eddie Reese Showdown. I don't know if they did it for, I guess Coleman, because you were there. If they did it for anything other than the streamed session, but having they would announce after each event, the school, like whichever school earned the most points from that event, they'd say this swimmer finished here, this swimmer finished here, they earned 37 points, whatever the combined amount was. The score updates with points, I think is super important for like a unfamiliar fan. They don't know, like, we look at the 100 fly and go, wow, Ilya went a 43 and Coach went a 44. Oh, that's crazy. If you don't know swimming, you're like, that ASU guy won.
Who's winning?
That's about it. Yeah, you just know that. But if you know points and the overall like pace of the meet, the only note I would give for that is, maybe every couple of events do a check-in at like, okay, this is where this team is, this is where that team is, this is where that team is, because then you kind of know, wow, that was a clutch, 200 breaststroke that jumped this team ahead of that team. I think things like that are things that, because not all pool scoreboards have like a spot to like showcase a score, and sometimes scoreboards have that and they just don't use it. So that's always something that I've been very vocal about in terms of like find a way to communicate the score, because that's anyone who's watched a sport before. We're just joking at the start of this about the Super Bowl, right? Like, oh yeah, we know everything about it. We can still follow it because at the bottom the entire time is telling you how well each team is doing. And for the first half, one team was doing a lot better than the other one.
Seriously.
The one thing that I would love to see a little bit more of for like next season, right, is because we have that excitement that's trending in a really good way. It's been really good in terms of just like that energy and excitement. I think the way you can elevate that and interest even more new fans is to find some way to introduce more stakes. It's hard to do outside of like if you completely reformat the NCAA and have a dual meet bracket, like that's a fun hypothetical to go down. I would talk for about 3 hours about it if I actually tried to, and it's not very practical. The most actionable thing that I would love to see more teams do is to, especially for like rivalry meets that you have every year, look at the Battle of the Burr. It has a name. If you add in like a traveling trophy, you have instant stakes there that any 2 programs can agree to, because so many teams have the same handful of dual meets that they have every single year because it works, because it's a rivalry school or because you're nearby. If you just have some way, because that is all, like the Battle of the Burst 3, 4, 5, stuff like that. That's easily marketable. You can push that out on socials, on campus to your like student body population that's right there. May as well go see it anyways. Find a way to work around, make sure you're not doing it at the same time as like a football game, basic things like that. But I think if you just kind of think more about like the event planning and that side of it, that's going to be a way to, I think, level up those kind of, that's continuing storyline through college swimming of like pure spectator numbers.
And I feel like we've gotten it, we've done better, but yes, we can continue moving that one forward. Sophie, final thoughts?
I mean, I think in addition to, the rivalry meet buildup, I think one thing that felt really exciting about this season was how often it felt like the top 10 teams were racing each other, which kind of felt new from what we've seen in the last couple of years. Indiana went to Texas, Virginia, NC State, ASU, they all just went to Texas. Indiana went to Florida as well. Like we got to see all of these teams go head to head in a dual meet format, which we don't always get to see so often. Conference consolidation in some ways makes it now a little easier because it's like, oh, it's an in-conference thing. But it feels like so often in the past, a lot of these teams would kind of avoid going head to head until conferences, until NCAAs. And now which was boring. And now it's really exciting to see them, even
terrible.
though it's not the same format as NCAAs. It's exciting to see them all, buy in and want to race each other and to suit up and go fast and try and out touch each other, even if it's not, the fastest time. Like just getting that racing experience in against these other top programs brings more of the rehearsal element into it, and also just makes it so much more exciting to watch, as swim fans. So I really appreciated that about this season too.
Well, I feel like when you have the top, as you said, top 10 teams racing each other in a different format that isn't going to be like conference championships or NCAAs, then it gives us more to talk about because then we have to, by necessity, speculate more, right? But we have data to speculate with. So I feel like it's just a win-win, right? Where it's like, not only are we seeing dual meets, but we're seeing dual meets with like different formats. Virginia, Florida goes short course meters. Eddie Reese Showdown does whatever they did. It's like, it's completely different. It's outside the box. It's fun, it's spectator friendly, and so we get to see great races, great swimming. It's the same events, but then we're like, okay, so now what is this going to look like when it's the conference championships? It's a 4.5 day prelims finals meet. Like, what are the differences? And we're actually going to see one example of this in sink or swim in just a couple of minutes, but I think it's a win-win. Yeah. So I love that too. It's so great seeing top teams race each other, because as you said, for so long we didn't, and it's like it just made it more boring.
Is it March yet?
Seriously. So yeah, I feel like not at any point in this college season where we like, man, I just wish conference championships were here. It's like we always had something exciting to look forward to every month, and I feel like we've truly never had that before. So way to go, college swimming. And on that note, let's get into sink or swim for the day. First up, I'm going to switch the order. We were just talking about it. So we saw Luca Orlando break the NCAA record in the 200 fly. He took down King Kong. I saw someone call Jack Conger that in the comments, and I can't believe no one had ever said that before. Or I had never heard it, at least before. Maybe it was a team nickname or something, but it's like, what? How have we not been using this? He's retired now. It's a waste. But he took down Jack Conger's legendary NCAA record in the 200 fly, which was 137.1, I think. Anyway, 137 low. Luca broke it at a dual meet, which begs the question, will the 200 fly NCAA record get broken at NCAAs or at a conference championships? Because we saw this last year where Ilya Karun and Andrei Minikov went two fastest times in the NCAA at a dual meet. And then the winning time at NCs, I believe, was not faster than that time. Because a dual meet is a one-day affair. conference and NCAAs. The 2 fly is day 4. So what do you guys think? Sophie, I'm tossing this one to you first. Sink or swim, men's NC2A record 200 fly gets broken in February or March.
Okay, well, at NCAAs, I'm sinking it for all the reasons that you just talked about. It's literally the last individual event of a 4-day prelims finals championship. This is a high intensity meet. All of these swimmers who are, kind of in the running to break this record or to again this season, Orlando, Karoon, let's toss Dari Rose and Gabe Jett in there as well, and Minikov, right? Like, these are all swimmers who have a lot of relay swims to do as well. So just for that reason, I think we're going to get a really good race. The 200 fly is always a close race to watch. At least it has been the past couple seasons, just kind of for the chaos of the final individual event of the meet. But I don't think we'll see the NCAA record go down in March in Federal Way. I think there's a much better shot to see them kind of trade blows across the country at their various conference meets. But I don't think in March it'll go down.
Mm-hmm. David?
I am going to swim it because I think that we have a nice, a wealth of opportunities for it, because we obviously have Orlando has the chance, either at conference or NCAAs to lower his own record. Ilya, he went a 137 in January last season, and then won the title, what was a bit slower. But maybe the fact that he was slower as 139 at the Texas Showdown might be a sign that he's kind of going to flip it and go a bit faster at NCAAs. And I think also the fact that you're, putting him and Orlando presumably in 2 lanes right next to each other, and then Minikov's going to be a factor as well, potentially. And I think I feel like Karoon and Orlando are the 2 big threats to really take down that record, with Minikov as like a dark horse for the record in particular. And I think when 200 fly, I think, is an event where you can really have some of the fastest swims when you have multiple fast swimmers right by you. I think there's some events, whether it's because they're too splashy or because they're almost too strategic, where you have too many people kind of feeding off each other. I think a 200 fly is kind of so painful that you're so locked into your own race plan that you're just like, I know that I'm doing this on this 50 and this on that 50. They can do whatever. Like, the amount of times 200 fly, I feel like more than any other event, you see other swimmers let people go ahead and be like, they're going to die. Compared to like a 400 free, right? If you like someone goes in a 400 free, you're like, oh crap, I can't let them get too far away, or a 200 free. Like that's kind of a different strategy for another like more strategic race. 200 fly is strategic solely in your own lane because you want to make sure the wheels aren't falling off in those last 25.
Absolutely. No, I like your reasoning. I had the same thought pattern with Ilya. It's like, okay, he's the defending champ this year. He's having a heck of a season. He's obviously made a leap in terms of ability and the times he's thrown down this season, aside from the 200 fly, aside from his 137 from the Stanford dual meet last year. But also Luca Orlando broke it. I think he has a great chance to break it again at at SECs, because it's not on the last day, it's on the second to last day. It's like a 4.5 day meet, so it's on day 4. Basically, it's sort of in the middle of the meet, and so I think that ups his chances to swim a really good race there. He'll still have relays and more events ahead of it, but Luca has also been having the best season of his career in terms of college swimming. So I'm swimming that it will get broken again. I don't think it'll get broken in NCAAs, and that really makes me sad. But
counterpoint, though, Conger broke his at NCAAs, so it is possible to go a 137 low in a 200 fly, and that if I don't know how heavily he was used on relays, if at all, though. But if he was,
I think he definitely.
that was a prelim finals
Yeah,
relays.
he definitely was
back then
on a lot of relays. But counter, he was swimming under Eddie Reese, who would use this method. He did not swim fast at the rest of the season. He just swam fast at
he
that
could have gone to 136.
Well, or maybe he could. Yeah, it's like he had a lot in the tank, and I think, to that point, I think we're able to see people swim so fast all season because they don't have to get ready for prelims, finals, relays at NCAAs, which I'm in full support of, because that that could put 4 more swims in a 3.5 day meet on your shoulders. And I think you do have to train a completely different way if that's what you're preparing to do, right? You do need a lot bigger of a taper or a block of rest to be like, okay, I have to be ready for 13 swims in 3.5 days compared to 8 or 9, which, yeah, I think that's a big difference. Okay, next up on Sink or Swim. The question on everyone's mind: is Gretchen Walsh the greatest yard swimmer of all time? David?
I don't know. This is such a hard question for me because I at the top of the breakdown, you kind of laid out what I think most people would agree are. I think in any sport ever, it's basically impossible accurately to compare across eras. So like, yeah, someone in comes probably like, well, Natalie Colley, you're not talking about her. Is I think at least in the last bit of like really fast NCAA swimming, you can consistently throw in three names, right? You have Gretchen Walsh, Caleb Dressel, Leon Marchand. The arguments between those, my answer might change to like 7 times if you ask me every day of a week. Between the 3 of them, I would say the thing that hurts Marchand the most is the fact that he did not do an entire NCAA career. So that makes it like he threw down some monstrous times, and in the IM event, that 500 free is crazy. But like one thing outside of like pure times and results, like one thing I've always found incredibly ridiculous is that Dressel managed to 4-peat a 50 free, which for men, that like the biggest part about 4-peating an event is the fact you had to win the event as a freshman, because just the impact of male freshmen in the NCAA is going to be, it's harder to get over the hump, and especially in such a power-based event like a 50 free. So being able to win as a freshman and then do it 3 more times is crazy. But then, of course, Gretchen Walsh, like the amount of events that she ranks top 10 all time. And she obviously is fastest ever in the 1500 freestyle and in the 100 fly and on the 100 back. And she's 5th in the 200 free and 9th in the 200 back and 9th in the 100 breast and like 17th in the 200 IM.
She's only 17.
And if you count the 50 back and or something, it's in the high teens. And if you count the 50 back and 100 IM, if they're unofficial events, those are also ridiculously fast. The thing that I feel like is, and it's even like, I mentioned like comparing across eras, I almost feel like with like Dressel and Gretchen are like such different sides of like the modern NCAA swimming, because I feel like Dressel's like right at the start of like all the times just going like crazy fast. Like I feel like we've seen so many swims get, with a few exceptions, right, of like records like that 200 fly record up until now that managed to hang on. There's some things where it's like, wow, that is like way, like the 200 free, right? Like when Townley first cracked that record in, what would have been 15 or 16, whenever he
16.
first got it, and then it's like, oh yeah, we're in the 128s now. He wasn't even the first one to break 130. Peroni beat him to it because it all just got so fast so quick after that record stood forever, or that 500 free. The absolute insane gap that Dressel had on the second fastest ever in the 50 free at the time he swam it. It's a lot closer now because the field has come up, and I feel like that's one of the biggest things in Dressel's favor in terms of, because I feel like for me, like Marchand, maybe unfairly, I feel like I'm kind of like with not a full NCAA season, it's kind of easier for me to be like, he's in the conversation, but I'd mostly narrow it down between Gretchen and Caleb. And I think the fact that his records in his primary events all still stand as of right now. They've been under threat increasingly, and it feels like, especially this year, it's like there's so many threats in so many of those events. But with how quickly NCAA records have been getting broken, the fact that his have really stood up under that kind of firepower is another added point in his favor. So right today, I'm leaning towards Dressel. Either they're tied, or he's like a fingernail ahead. And the thing I was thinking about earlier is that right now in individual events, Gretchen's got 4 NCAA records. Caleb at his peak had 5. Yep. So I say Gretchen gets either breaks the tie or becomes number 1, depending on how I'm feeling minute by minute at this point. If at ACC she either swims the 200 free or leaves off the relay, and all I ask is that she breaks Missy Franklin's 200 free record.
Fair,
undisputed
fair
number
enough.
1 at that point.
Fair enough. Sophie?
Yeah, I feel like this one's also, it kind of sucks that this part is in sink or swim, because I kind of want to be like, let me tread water until she does her last 2 meets, and then I'll have an answer to the question. Just because, it.
I basically
it basically just feels like, comparing across eras, we were just talking about how people approach the NCAA regular season so differently now, and Gretchen swims fast seemingly every single meet, and she can do that because of the way that the training has changed so much, and UVA has been at the forefront of that, and it's allowing her to drop these historic relay splits or 50 freestyles almost with increasing regularity, to the point that it seems like whatever, Gretchen just went 20.4 in the 50 freestyle again, like she's done that 5 other times. But she's coming to the end of her college career now. She's got the 2 meets left. It feels like she's been going fast all season, but yet it still feels like there is something left in the tank for her to do something truly special at these 2 meets. That makes me want to wait to answer. And I do think a lot of this, is the fact that she's doing it right now. It's at the top of our minds. It's easy to say that there is a bit of recency bias. It's been so long since we've seen Caleb wreak havoc on a yards pool. I think right now I would agree with David that I would still put Dressel ahead of her, but check back in with me in March and that may change.
An interesting question I would pose that doesn't negate either of your answers. Like, do you think Dressel would have thrived as he did in this current era where people are swimming fast all year? Because he obviously had so much success with Greg Troy in the system, right? In like the older system where you only swam really, really fast at the end of the season. And like, I'm not so sure he would have. Maybe he is a good enough athlete to where he would have, but it's interesting to think about, because I can't give a definitive yes. I don't feel like
it feels like ISLs is the closest we got to seeing what that would look like. Mm-hmm. And that's, short course meters.
That's true.
He did pretty well there.
He did pretty well there. But he would always do the best at the end of the season too. So maybe he would have.
I think, because I'm trying to think, because he seems like, from the way he talks about training and stuff like that, he seems to be someone like he said multiple times that his favorite part of swimming is the grind and like the big training blocks. And I feel like, but that could also be right because that's what he did, so that's what he's familiar with, and that's how he likes to succeed. Because I also feel like he seems like someone else that just enjoys racing for racing sake. So I feel like he would also have the potential to thrive in that like constant racing and like needing to be tested, at in-season meets over and over and over again. So it's one of those things where we could just, like you talking about speculating back when we didn't see the top team swim, it's like we could just go circles and circles about whether or not he would. And it's like, maybe he might just be a good enough athlete or be able to embrace it, but maybe that he's, I always think it's so interesting of like as a sprinter in particular that he was so like high yardage, high volume, and that was something that was like just worked for him. And how much of that was just because that's what he did and that's what he knew he needed to get done at practice. How much of that was just it actually suited his personality and how he enjoyed approaching training. I don't know.
To get back to the sink or swim, because we'll obviously never know the answer to that, the last question. I'm willing to listen. I think you both made great arguments. Like, the thing that moves the needle for Gretchen, for me, is that the reason why I would swim it, and I'm not saying I am yet, but the reason why I would swim it is because she's obviously so good in so many events. And I think I understand that Dressel had 5 NCAA records and currently Gretchen only has 4, but like she's top 10 in like 7 events or something, like in so many, like if she swam every 200 at any meet, really, she wouldn't, I don't think she'd even have to be shaved and tapered. Like she could be so good in so many of those. And I'm not sure we could have said the same about Caleb. Like 2 fly, sure. I think he could have been top 5. 2 back, no. 2 breasts, no. Like I think definitively he would not have been top 10, right? 2 free, yeah. And like, in 2 IM, yeah. But I also think it'll be interesting to see in the next 5 years how close people get to Gretchen's records, because we saw Caleb's 100 breast 2 IM get broken eventually, like within 5 years. His other 3 records have obviously stood the test of time up to this point. And it'll be interesting to see if all of them make it past this year, this championship season. But
thank you for tying a bow on the point that I started, by the way, with Dressel's, like how long is it? That was the kind of what I was getting at, is will she stand the test of time?
Yeah. I mean, and like Leon obviously has the versatility, has a little more range, right? And we saw him, he was ranked number 1 at like in 7 events, I think at one point in the NCAA. Didn't have as many NCAA records, but it's hard. It's a toss up for me, but honestly, I think I am going to swim Gretchen Walsh being the best yard swimmer of all time. And I think that her championship season will make it even more correct. Because I think she'll break more records, but I think the fact that she's so good in so many events and so dominant in so many events, that like it tips the scales for me, because even though we saw Caleb be dominant in 5 events, we've seen her be dominant in more events. And I think that's what it is for me. I think if Leon would have swam 1 more year, he would have cemented it.
Probably.
I'm with you there. Yeah. But he didn't. So, oh well. All right, let's move on. Someone emailed me and asked if I could include this in Sink or Swim. So I'm going to. Should Chris Guiliano be left off of Texas's 800 free relay at NCAAs? And basically his question was, how do you think Chris Guiliano should be used by Texas for Texas's relays at NCAAs? So this is how the Sink or Swim is worded. Should he be left off of the 800 free relay and assumably used on the other 4 relays? Sophie, coming to you first.
I'm trying to get the wording right. Sink, he should not be left off this relay.
He should be on the
800 free relay. I love this question. When the news about him going to Texas first broke, my first thought was, yeah, it'd be really cool to see him on it, but you got to leave him off. You have to leave him off because you need him for the other 4. But doing the math, Texas can't afford to leave him off this relay, quite frankly, at this point. If they, with him on the relay, they've got about a 0.2 lead over Cal's projected 800 freestyle relay. They're both under the NCAA record. You know, we've been tracking throughout the season the projected lineups of the top 5 teams, we think, you know, Indiana, Texas, Cal, ASU, I'm forgetting one, and Florida. And it was kind of, you know, a toss-up, but to the point that we were talking about earlier about momentum and how important that is at a meet like NCAAs, for Texas especially, it feels really important for them to do their best to get a win on that opening night with the 200 medley and 800 freestyle relay. And the 800 freestyle relay is their best chance at doing so. And they're going to be going up against Cal, who won last year, have the NCAA record, have Destin Lasco, Jack Alexi, who was, you know, Gabe Jett. They had Robin Hansen on there last year. You could put Lucas Henvo on there. Like, that is a serious relay that they need to take seriously. You know, it's not going to be easy to beat that lineup. And if they want to win this relay, they can't leave Guiliano off, in my opinion.
All right, David?
I do think that there is the potential that they could, you know, pick up more points overall if they use him on the other 4 relays. It kind of depends on, you really need to get into the weeds in terms of, because right now on the 400 medley relay, they traditionally use Luke Hobson on there because those two are actually pretty similar in terms of like 100 free speed. But then if you put him on that relay, then you'd have both of, you could potentially also throw Hobson on the 200 free relay, which would bump that way up because that one didn't even score last year. And even just Guiliano on that puts it up into scoring range. And if you also are able to, you know, however you're able to maneuver them around, which is what you would be gaining by having him on a different relay. But even if I think there is a potential pickup in points, you know, because I think whatever you gain by being able to have both of them on the 200 free relay, this just feels like the most logical benefit you get from going this way. There could be something that I'm missing, but some benefit in some way. I do think that, you know, because like whatever you gain from that might be more than like the couple point difference between first and second. So if you're basically talking about momentum with a win, and I think that is a super important thing, as well as I just want to see a fast 800 free relay. So for mostly personal reasons, I'm going to swim him being on that relay.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm with you guys. Whatever. Should he be left off? I'm sinking. He should be left off. I'm swimming. He should be on the 8 free relay. I was going to sink it or swim it. I was going to say leave him off of it. Then David, then you said Luke Hobson 400 medley relay makes sense to me. I don't think Guiliano would make as big of a difference on the 400 medley relay as he would on the 800 free relay. And that way he could be on the 2 medley as well as the 8 free. I think that's a very doable double in one night. And then I think that would maximize not only his usage on relays, but Texas relays as a whole. I think for Texas's 400 medley relay, I don't see them winning. I think they could, but I don't think the Hobson v. Guiliano would be the difference of them winning. It might be the difference of a place, but I don't think. I think if they're in the lead, I don't think Hobson would necessarily lose it. And if they're not in the lead, I don't know if Hobson would be the guy to get it done. But 800 free relay, now you have Hobson, Carosa, Maurer, and Guiliano. Whoo! I mean, that
That's why I want to see it.
They could go under 7 minutes. And I don't even think I'm being facetious or being delusional. I think that on paper that might actually be factual. And certainly not on paper, but just though all of those athletes have elevated this year from last year as well, seemingly. So it's that's a good relay, and seemingly that's a good start to your NCAAs in terms of momentum. So I'm with you guys. Put him on there, Bob.
Yeah. I think, not to get too in the weeds about NCAAs, because that is not what this is about, but I also think in terms of the 800 free lineups, it's going to be really interesting to see what Florida chooses to do there, whether they put Josh Leando on this relay at NCAAs or if they leave him off. Just to throw that in the mix as well. Because they've lost 2 big relay pieces, and depending on how they want to play this meet, that's going to, I think, factor in on whether they use Leando here or not.
I'm so interested to see, this is off topic, but I'm so interested to see how the Florida men, this is my last sink or swim. We had another one. I'm going to cut that one, but I'm going to give you guys this and I'll go first on it. Because this was inspired by the SwimSwam poll of the week, which was which defending team do you think has the most, or which favorite team men's team at a conference championships? I'm butchering this. Which favorite is most at risk of being upset at the men's conference championships? It was Cal in the ACC, Texas in the SEC, Indiana Big 10, or ASU in Big 12. But that got me thinking, do you think the Florida men have a shot at beating the Texas men at SECs? I think they're the 8 or 9 time defending champions on the men's side.
11 or 12.
12 time defending. They have won this meet for a long time. They know how to do this meet, but boy, have the Florida men taken some hits this season. They have lost Adam Chaney. They have lost the best named man in swimming, McGuire McDuff. And I feel like if that doesn't kind of kill your momentum a little bit, I don't know what does. And maybe as a team, they're handling it quite well. But Texas, I would say Texas men are certainly the favorite. But I think I am going to sink the Florida men even having a chance at winning, even though, again, they have seemingly they have this meet dialed in. They know how to swim fast at this meet, and it scores to 32, I believe. And so you have a D heat that can score points, and that really takes into account your team depth as opposed to the top end. And I think Florida has a deep team in terms of SEC scoring and potential, but just in terms of their relays, they lost 2 huge pieces. And I'm just thinking, I mean, they have a great breaststroke. They have the top ranked breaststroker in the country. They have one of the best, they have the best butterfly relay swimmer in history. They have, I'm sure they have a freestyle leg, and they have Scotty Buff who can do backstroke and sprint freestyle, I think. So it's they have pieces, and I'm guessing they're going to swim better than we've seen them swim at all this season at the SEC championships. But I just don't see them having a chance versus Bob Bowman's Texas team right now. David, what do you think about the surprise sink or swim?
Yeah, because Texas is fast and that scoring out to a D final really does kind of change the trajectory of what are the, do you know off the top of your head, like the entry limitations or like roster or like scoring
I want to say
rosters?
22 or 23 in terms of athletes you can
sounds right.
take.
Yeah, and then the rest are probably just like exhibitions.
I think it might actually be only
so that's
D final. I don't think there is a D final. I think it's just a C final.
Okay.
Yeah, or maybe they score out to the C final and then they swim a D
Yeah.
final like exhibition. I've
Okay.
seen some conferences do that with C finals, like an outscoring C final. But yeah, that kind of changes the trajectory, but at the same time with teams of that caliber, it's probably just inflating the overall point total. I'd say the one kind of X factor that Florida can have to have a shot against Texas in this, right, is that you mentioned that they're really good at SECs, and I believe they've traditionally kind of gone all in on SECs, like done a full taper for it. I think in some post-race interviews you've done with Florida Swimmers, they mentioned like, yep, we're full shave, full taper, we'll do it again for
And it
NCAAs,
works.
but and it's worked for them before. They've got that dialed in. That kind of that double taper works really well for them. So I think that, depending on how Texas wants to approach it, but at the same time, maybe you don't need to do a full taper if you're not doing that for the hand motion of the breakdown today, of the old school arc of a season, is if you're not as necessary. Whereas Florida is one of the few schools that's like really hanging on to that older pattern, whereas Texas, if you're already starting at such a fast time. But I'll swim them having a chance. I don't think it's a large chance.
Fair enough. Sophie?
Yeah, you're teeing me up really well. I'm in charge of the SEC men's preview, so this is doing my work for me. But I think that I would agree with David. There is a chance, but I think it's a really small one. I think that the behemoth that is the Florida men's distance group could really could really help them kind of push that over the edge. Texas has Rex Maurer, like a solid top end of their distance group, but Florida is just so strong, and that's really going to show in a meet that scores out to at least the C final. I think it really depends on what Florida thinks is going to make this season feel successful. They've lost so many pieces. They just lost to Florida State in their last regular season meet. We can have a conversation about who was tapered and how much rest everybody got, but that still stings to lose to your rival school. And so, arcing out to NCAAs, it doesn't feel like they're in the conversation in the same way that, even ASU or Tennessee is. They've got their stars, but it doesn't feel like the team is in the conversation for, getting involved in the title hunt in a way that it did feel like they were when we were in March of 2024 and thinking about what next year was going to look like. So, is the ultimate goal of the season, like, if we preserve our SEC streak, that is a successful season for us? And is that really going to be the focus? Because they've certainly got a ton of stars. Josh Leando, Julian Smith is just getting better and better. Breaking Caleb Dressel's SEC record in the 100 breaststroke was huge. They've got Johnny Marshall, who broke out at SECs last year. And, they have Aiden Norman, who could follow in those footsteps this year. He's the double gold medalist at Junior Pan Packs in the backstroke events. So it feels like they have a lot of individual stars who could really make this meet close in the individual races, but it just feels like as a team right now, Texas has so much momentum and such a desire to just go fast and win everything. They went undefeated in the regular season this year. It kind of feels like they want to announce themselves in the SEC in a really big way and win at their first SECs and then go on and roll that right into successful NCAAs. So I think it is going to be really hard for Florida to stop that train. It doesn't mean it's impossible, though. Lots of we've seen crazy things happen at championship meets. DQs happen all the time. There's a reason they swim the meets.
Fair enough. I love you guys' answers. I love your input. Thank you for being here on the SwimSwam Breakdown today. With that, I'm going to say this is the end of the show. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And we will be back very, very soon with more breakdowns to come as we roll in.